Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. This week we're going to take a look at what is happening events and activities-wise in Kingston for the rest of the summer with Jillian Fisher. First though, we're going to learn about the Resource Center for Accessible Living with Executive Director Susan Hoger and Systems Advocate Keith Gerge. Hi guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Susan, tell me what the Resource Center for Accessible Living is. You call it RCAL, which sounds like a rapper from California or a new diet pill, but what is RCAL?
Well, the Resource Center for Accessible Living is what's considered an independent living center, and there are about 40 across New York State, some of which are federally funded, some of which are state funded. RCAL, which most people refer to as, was one of the first in New York State. And what we basically do is serve people with disabilities, any age, to live as independently in the communities they want. And that might involve things like housing, benefits advisements, other fiscal matters, accessibility issues, a ramp to their house, a ramp that needs to be on the end of the sidewalk on their street. So really, we're all about independence and choice, self-determination. And most independent living centers are consumer-driven, meaning that people with disabilities tell us what their needs are. So every independent living center in New York is slightly different based on their community.
Terrific. And Keith, you're a systems advocate. What does that mean?
Correct. I work for the statewide systems advocate network from the New York Association on Independent Living. We deal a lot with policy issues up in Albany with legislators, whether it be accessibility in election law or tax credits for hiring individuals with disabilities. Every year we come out with our priority agenda, and I think there's about 17 to 20 advocates around the state. And like I said, we deal with policy issues, but we also have our own little niche in our own independent living centers. I go out and I meet individuals with disabilities in classrooms or in institutions and talk about services that are available, different types of waiver programs that they could be eligible for to get them out of institutions and into their own homes.
Now you have some big programs too, right, Sue, at RCAL?
We do.
Tell me about some of those.
Well, we run about 13 different programs, and we're much bigger than most people think we are. And because we've been around for almost 30 years, and a lot of our programs are very specialized. So I'll just give you an example of 5 or 6. We have a special ed advocacy program, so that's for parents whose kids are in special education in school, to make sure that they're getting the best services, not necessarily the best that money can buy, but the best that are appropriate for their child in their school system. Because sometimes school systems will get a kid and they don't know what to do. It's not about, I won't do it. It's, I don't know what to do. I haven't seen this particular disability before, or these needs kinds of things before.
And the educational system is sort of bulk institutional in its approach a lot of times. In other words, they want to address the needs of as many people as they can with sort of one program. And if you're an individual with a specific issue, it's a challenge.
It can very much be a challenge, but that can go both ways. And I'll give you an example of that. If I refer to somebody who's a concrete learner, that means they have to see in front of them what exactly it is they're learning. That could be a person with a learning disability, a person with autism, a person with mild mental retardation. So that concept of how they learn can be moved from one child to another with different diagnoses. Part of our resources and our philosophy is that the diagnosis itself doesn't necessarily matter because it doesn't dictate what you do. So we have the special ed advocates. We also have an architectural modification person who will go out to businesses, houses, pretty much any place somebody asks them, and says, this is how you make your house safer in terms of accessibility. So that's another program that we run. We run 3 different waiver programs, which are for people with specifically different types of disabilities. Nursing home transition people, so those are seniors or people with medical conditions that might end up in a nursing home, to keep them out or get them out should they accidentally have gotten into a nursing home. And you might say, how can you accidentally get into a nursing home? Things that happen, like you fall, you break your hip, you're in rehab. While you're in rehab, your income is shifted to pay for your rehab expenses. You lose your apartment, you're homeless, you're discharged to a nursing home. People don't understand how frequently that happens. The fastest growing number of people in nursing homes are people between 30 and 60 because they're going in based on injuries, not on senior frailties. So we run those kinds of waivers. We run a waiver, traumatic brain injury waiver. And these kinds of waiver programs are cheaper than institutionalization. A typical institutionalization can cost anywhere from $70,000 a year for a person in a nursing home to $120,000 a year for a person in an office for people with developmental disabilities run group home. So there's a huge range. We can do that typically, those waiver programs, for about half to a third. And we do have a capitation on that rate. So we can't just spend money freely. You know, we're held to a higher standard than, you know, the traditional funding silos. So those programs, you know, are basically service coordination and those kinds of services that might keep a person in community.
Terrific. It's a fascinating thing that you guys are doing, and I want to talk more about it, but we're going to take a quick break, okay?
Great.
It's Kingston Now, and more about RCal when we return. Welcome back to Kingston Now. This week we're talking about the Resource Center for Accessible Living, or RCal, with Executive Director Sue Hoger and Systems Advocate Keith Gerge. Now, Keith, did you come to RCal as, I'm going to say client, but that's not the right word, is it?
I would say consumer. I was initially hurt from a spinal cord injury in 2009, and I went to rehab for about almost 6 months, and then I had to deal with modifying my own home. Because now I'm in a wheelchair, my home was not accessible, it's 2 floors, and through trying to inquire how to get that done, I met a service coordinator from RCal, got set up with Medicaid and all the things I needed to get set up with, and was introduced to the nursing home transition diversion waiver, and that provided for funds to have my house made accessible with 2 elevator lifts in my house, cut corners, over-the-head Hoyer lift to get from the wheelchair into bed. I paid for assistive technology so I can go online on the internet, and through communications with my service coordinator, she talked about work at RCal, and then there was a job position for an advocate, and I'd said, you know, I would love to do something. It got me out of the house as a taxpayer doing stuff, so, you know, I wrote about how community-based services really actually get people like me out of institutions where they wouldn't have access to information as much, and actively engage in their community and benefit a lot from it.
Yeah, that's great stuff. You say RCal has been doing this for 30 years, your 30th anniversary?
30th anniversary is coming up. Yeah.
Is it a national organization or is it statewide?
Well, it's both. I'm currently the chairperson for the New York State Association for Independent Living, and every state has something comparable. And then they all feed into something called the National Council on Independent Living. So we are very much involved in projects that are cross state lines as well as things that are very much local.
Tell me about the process of advocacy and going up the chain of command, if you will, to Albany and then on to Washington if you need to.
Well, typically what we have is a particular issue that arises, either a regulatory or a funding issue, because people with disabilities, although they have a fairly large voice, and I want to emphasize in New York we're really good about speaking out. We're New Yorkers. For example, recently, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Management have a new definition for community living, and it says things like no locked doors, being able to eat whenever you want. You listening to me and saying, isn't that common sense?
Yeah.
But we have to regulate everything. The federal government's getting a little uncomfortable with that and started to back off some of it. New York had 50% of the responses to that change in regulation because we're a highly evolved regulatory and advocacy network. And so we have those ways of feeding up, but then when they say, okay, you're feeding us all this information, then help us solve that problem. So currently I'm sitting on the community first choice option as appointed by the governor to help solve that problem. How are we going to get this definition in place? How are we going to get this waiver in place so it fits New Yorkers? How are we going to get the most services out of it for the money? Not just say, well, this is what we need, but this is how we're going to do it. So over the years, independent living centers have changed from grassroots advocacy thing that's very much civil rights. They started in the 70s with a lot of civil rights movements to small businesses that have become very much, politicized. There are still some that are very much grassroots.
So you're not just the executive director, you're also sitting on a bunch of boards and very, very involved in this, in the whole movement.
That's correct. Yeah. Because we sit, we're sort of a micro and a macro. If we don't do both, we're not really serving the people that we need to. So, you know, part of when we do PR, we're always a little afraid we're going to overwhelm ourselves because our workers are really working to their max already, but there are so many more people who need other kinds of services, and they don't even know that they're eligible, or they don't know that this simple thing would make their life so much easier. Like when Keith mentioned assistive technology, that term doesn't necessarily mean a lot to people, but for Keith to say, I use the computer, kids would automatically say, how can he do that? He can't even type. Yeah. Keith has a little thing that's usually on his glasses that points at the computer that will read, you know, what he needs to type onto the keys. I'm making it very simplistic, but what I'm telling you is, as an information and referral agency, we'll find those pieces of equipment. We'll send you where you need to go. We'll tell you what kind of evaluation you need. So we're all about information and referral to keep people in the community. And whether it's somebody teaching you how to walk your dog because you've always lived with your parents and now your parents are deceased, whatever it may be, that's what we do. So we really fill in the cracks on a micro level. On a macro level, we need the funding and people to recognize people need to stay in the community. The legislators get that. They realize that we've saved $10 million in the last decade in independent living services.
And that always gets a legislator's attention.
That does.
Well, you guys are doing great work. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
This is Kingston Now, and next we're going to take a look at some of the great things to see and do in Kingston this summer with Jillian Fisher. You're watching Kingston Now, and we're joined by Jillian Fisher, who has been hired by the City of Kingston to tell people about the great things happening here. That's about it in a nutshell, right, Jillian?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Now, when I say you were been hired by the city, you have your own private public relations firm, is that correct?
That's correct, Jillian Fisher Public Relations.
But you actually have a title with the city as well.
Yes, I'm the coordinator of tourism and cultural affairs.
Is that a little unusual? Doesn't a city usually hire an agency and not give them a title, sort of?
Well, because I'm acting on behalf of the city with public relations, it actually makes it easier when I call people and speak with people and send press releases to know that there's a person with a title who actually does represent the city of Kingston.
Ah, good. So it has a little clout, right?
A little clout.
Our mayor, Shane Gallo, is he your boss?
Yes, he is. I answer directly to him.
And I've seen you out and about with him at the farmers market and various functions. He seems to be a huge advocate of getting the word outside of Kingston, about Kingston, outside of Kingston. Can you tell me what kind of reception you get when, for instance, you send a press release to a New York City newspaper?
Well, absolutely. I can give you one example. And first, let me just say about Mayor Gallo that I'm thrilled to be working with him because he truly gets it. In a nutshell, he gets it. He understands that things can't go on the same way, and you can still bring people here. You can't. You have to think outside the box. You have to do outside the box. And he is on the front lines and trying to make that happen. An example would be, right now we have a free fitness series in Kingston Parks, which is fantastic. We took yoga in the park, which has been going on with the Kingston Land Trust, which they have just done wonderfully. And we also partnered with the YMCA of Kingston and Mac Fitness of Kingston. And so weekly through Labor Day weekend, there's a free fitness series in parks throughout the city of Kingston where you can do everything from yoga to Zumba to Tai Chi, just wonderful stuff. And that press release, for instance, was picked up by New York Newsday.
And why do you think, now what about that particularly got their attention? Is it an unusual thing for a municipality to do free fitness in their parks? Is it because, you know, Kingston has a certain allure to the downstate folks?
Well, I think it's a combination of all of these. I also use, as you well know, my personal Facebook page for posting this as well, and I've had friends in Jersey. Right, I wish we could do this here. I mean, there's so much wonderful stuff going up here, and of course going on here, and the fitness appeals to everybody, and the fact that it's free and it's all over the city.
Now, I've seen your Facebook page. I see how much you post on a daily basis. And I remarked to my wife, I think she must be getting paid by the post. Because
yeah, that's what it is.
And then I realized that there's really a lot to talk about in Kingston. So let's do some of that. Let's talk about what's going to happen for the rest of the summer. Last time I saw you, it was mid-May, and we were talking about the opening of the farmers market. And here we are approaching mid-July.
Right.
And so let's take a run from here out to Labor Day and tell people about some of the amazing things happening in Kingston.
Okay, well, on a monthly basis, which is fantastic, you have what's going on with the galleries in Kingston. First Saturday with ASK, the Art Societies of Kingston. And throughout the galleries throughout the city, They change their showings every single Saturday of the month, and there are artist receptions, which is neat. You can go, you can meet the artists, and this is all free. You just walk into a gallery, and the great thing is they are throughout the city, which is fantastic. It's not like we have everything clustered in Kingston, which is bonus.
Yeah, and we've talked about on previous shows and with the mayor about some of the amazing artists that are calling Kingston home these days, and as a result, we have these terrific galleries running from uptown through midtown and down to on Beale Street, for instance, a place that I know you're very familiar with, the Kingston, the KMOCA, which stands for Kingston
Museum of Contemporary Arts.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. They've got a really cool show that's going on right now, as a matter of fact.
And I say you're familiar with it because your brother Adam was one of the original founders.
Yes, yeah. My brother's a musician, as you very well know, and when he wasn't on tour, he was looking for something to do in Kingston. And because he has contacts all over the world, basically, he was able to use those contacts to bring in incredible shows. He had a show about maybe 3 years ago, and there were pictures of Darfur. And one of the photos in that show actually wound up being Time Magazine's photo of the year. So, but that leads back to what you were saying, is artists love it here. Because comparatively speaking, Kingston is cheap, which is great. I mean, we locally may think, oh, well, there's this, there's that. But when you have a broad world view, Kingston is a bargain. And artists can move here. There's loft space, there's charming buildings, whatever they're looking for, they have it here. And they've got the backup of great places like R&F and Caustic Paints, which I know you are familiar with. And it's just Kingston has so much as a reservoir to build with.
Let's hear about more of the things on your list when we come back, okay?
Excellent.
This is Kingston Now, and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Kingston Now. With us again is Jillian Fisher from the city of Kingston. Jillian, so what other things do we have going on in Kingston for the rest of the summer?
Well, if I can talk about our Movies Under the Stars program. This is new this year, and this is fantastic. This is going on throughout parks all over the city, and what it is free movies. You can come and bring your family too, which is so exciting. I'm very excited about the one that's coming up this weekend, which is E.T.
Oh yeah.
And E.T. is going to be at Kingston Point Beach. How cool that you can go to the beach and watch E.T.
And it's free.
And it's free.
Yeah.
And there's always something before the movie as well. So for example, Keith Bennett's Karate Academy will be doing something at 7:30 when the movie starts at 8:30. And that's, again, Kingston Point. The Goonies are going to be in Cornell Park. I don't know if you remember the Goonies.
It's a great movie from the 80s, yeah.
Isn't that cool? And Pook is going to be performing there at 7:30. Grease is going to be the following weekend on the 27th of July at Forsyth Park. And the AME Zion Youth Chorale is going to perform at 7:30. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, August 3rd in Lauren Park. And there's going to be a Zumba in the park at 7:30. Disney's Up, Hasbrook Park, August 10th. Keith Bennett's Karate Academy, again, 7:30. 8:30 the movie. Superman is going to wrap everything up at the King's Inn on Broadway, which is nice because it brings people into Midtown. I don't know if you've noticed what they've done with the site, but it looks fantastic.
And the site being the former King's Inn Motel, which has been torn down now for about a year.
And they're putting a little bit of a green space in there while they decide what's going on. And so there's going to be a big celebration on August 17th. And that's going to start at 6:30.
What's great about the Movies in the Park series is that some months back we had the people on the show who wanted to fire it up again because it had apparently it happened in the past in Kingston, and they had to raise something like $15,000 for the equipment, and they did, and here it is. This has come to fruition, and now people can go see these movies for free in these parks through the summertime.
Absolutely, and I would like to say that they were able to buy the equipment locally through Markertech in Saugerties, which was amazing because they got bigger equipment, better equipment. It was half the price, and they kept it in Ulster County.
How terrific, huh?
Yeah, it's all about keeping it local. Go ahead.
And let's talk about walking tours in historic Uptown Kingston.
Yes, absolutely. The Friends of Historic Kingston are just outstanding, and they offer walking tours both of the Stockade District in Uptown and also of the Rondout, which we'll get to later, and in the fall, which I'll come back to talk about, is a Midtown walking tour. We'll talk about that later. But yes, so they've got walking tours of the Stockade District, and we've got, as you know, numerous museums in the Stockade District as well. So you can walk through, you can hear the history of the Stockade District, you can see the architecture and what it represents, you can see the most historic four corners in the entire country, and you can go to the Firemen's Museum, which is the best deal going in Kingston. I believe it's a suggested $2
Yeah, it's a volunteer
admission.
fires museum on Fair Street, I believe.
Yes,
yeah.
it is, and they've got the Firemen's Muster coming up in, I will find that by the end, but that's coming up. The Firemen's Muster is August 11th, and they close down Fair Street, and they have a boatload of antique fire engines there. It is so cool. You've got the Senate House in Uptown Kingston. You've got the Person House, which is free and on the historic Four Corners. You've got the county courthouse, where in 1828 Sojourner Truth won the freedom of her son Peter. So you've got so much. You've got the Forsyth Nature Center within walking distance of the Stockade, where they have parks for children. You can go to camp. Your kids can go to nature camp there.
And something people don't do who live here is they don't go out a lot onto the water. We've talked about that with some of the people from the Hudson River Cruises, but we've got an incredible lighthouse tour that people can take.
Oh, absolutely. You can board the Lark, and you can tour the Esopus Meadows Lighthouse and the Rondout Lighthouse. And our waterfront is just amazing, and especially the promenade that they've put in. You can walk from the Maritime Museum right through to Dock Street. And I do that walk often. And if you're paying attention on the walk, we also have a monument there which is dedicated to our Civil War soldiers. I mean, and it's amazing. There's history all over Kingston. You just have to open your eyes to pay attention to it. In Midtown, I always suggest people to stop into City Hall. It is such a beautiful building. Council Chambers is breathtaking. And downtown, we also have the Trolley Museum. And the same people who produce the Hooli, which we'll talk about for Labor Day weekend, are building an Irish Cultural Center down on the Strand. So I fully expect within 2 years that we'll have an additional museum down there with the Irish Cultural Center.
We'll see you back in the fall, Jillian.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's show. Thanks to Sue Hoger and Keith Gerge of the Resource Center for Accessible Living. Find out more about what they do and how you can help at rcal.org. And thanks again to Jillian Fisher. Remember, all of our shows are now archived on our YouTube channel, and you can find that link on our Facebook page. You can also suggest topics for future shows on Facebook. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. We'll see you next time.